2023 Toyota GR Supra. And this is going to be part 2 of the introduction and my initial impressions. As I stated in my last video, my previous car choices, my vehicle history, if you will, really informs what I think about this car and my personal preferences. So I am going to be comparing it to my 2018 WRX STI and also a little bit to the my daily, the Golf GTI. So let's get into it. Now, when I first got this car from the dealership and went to pull out, the first thing I noticed that was really different was the clutch. Now, it's been described, I think accurately by others, as having a little bit of a springiness to it. And it definitely took me by surprise when I went to release the clutch and get moving. And the springiness really kind of helps your, it's almost like it's helping your foot off the pedal. So it's not as kind of like, I'd say, linear. Once it starts to engage, that's where, if you're not expecting it, it definitely took me by surprise, and I was just like, well, let's not hit a camera in the parking lot trying to get out of here. But overall, the clutch has decent weight to it. Engagement is about low to mid compared to the WRX STI, which was definitely high engagement. Not the heaviest clutch, not the lightest. It doesn't have a vagueness to it, which I like comparatively compared to others. The second thing I noticed, because obviously you get off the clutch and you get on the throttle when you start moving, was that the throttle response is definitely lacking. Now, I am on the cusp of braking in this car, so still in normal mode, kind of like I do. But the throttle, you really have to dip in that throttle to get what I think many cars in their normal mode give you as far as responsiveness, which is not my favorite thing. We'll see what sport feels like after I finish braking in and get its first oil change. One of the mods I may do is a kind of throttle sensitivity increaser. It improves responsiveness by intercepting and amplifying the signal. I may do that. But once you kind of dip into it to a certain level, then it sort of wants to get going. Now, the third thing I noticed, and this is the third pedal, the brake pedal, is that it is very sensitive. It is actually one of the most sensitive brakes I've driven on a sporty car. It's not as progressive as the STIs. So, driving home from the dealership was definitely not my smoothest driving experience, because all three pedals were just vastly different than I was used to. But once you do get used to it, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Now, obviously, the next thing to go over is the shifter. The best part of this vehicle, now that it's manual, it has a actual row your own shifter. The feel of the shifter is very tight, very notchy, and it's a different notchiness. I would say the STI's transmission had a level of notchiness to it. Once I added shifter bushings, it had a more notchiness to it, more tighter feel. Even the GTI's has a good level of notchiness, but this one, I'd say it's very precise in terms of feel. It doesn't have like a fully gated feel, but it definitely is very confident as you kind of go into each gear. So it's a very nice feel to it, and you can definitely tell that they took out the things that prevent the noise, harshness, vibration, because you can feel a little bit of what's going on down there through the shifter. So the weight savings is definitely noticed. All right, next up, steering. Steering for, and this is my first car with kind of that electric power steering system. The STI had hydraulic steering, and I think the GTI even has electric assist hydraulic, but this one fully electric. So the actual feedback you're getting is, basically fake. But it's not bad. It's heavier than I was expecting, coming from hydraulic, and it's very precise. The first time I did a U-turn in this car, I was very pleasantly surprised at how tight this thing turns. I described the GTI before as a go-kart in a sense, but this one definitely turns like a go-kart. It's very tight, and I love it. Aside from the appearance of the steering wheel, I think that's the next thing to talk about. I think everyone can agree why they gave it this sort of like stacked dinner plate feeling with the airbag area. I have no idea. But the actual steering wheel itself, when I first got the car, I wasn't sure whether I liked it or didn't like it. I definitely didn't love it. I definitely didn't hate it. The more I do drive it, the more it's oddly shaped. Honestly, and especially, I'm a 9 and 3 kind of guy as I steer. The way it's shaped, especially here, it sort of pinches in, so it's very thin here, which you would think sort of kind of helps your hands lock in, but the amount it's sort of pinched in gets uncomfortable on longer drives, especially if I'm just kind of cruising and not really thinking about where to put my hands. I'm just going at it. Yeah, it definitely gets kind of crampy in an odd way. The shape of the steering wheel, besides being called thin, what's interesting is the outer edge is thicker than the inner. It sort of tapers inward. So definitely a interesting shape. I think getting a new steering wheel is definitely on my list of potential mods. Something thicker, something that is a bit easier to grab. This one just, it doesn't really cut it as far as, I'd say, comfortably being able to grab and steer. Now, overall, driving this thing in normal mode, breaking it in, it's still pretty fun. It's still pretty fun. Even in normal mode, the exhaust has a great sound. If you rev it standing still, there's some crackle pops, warm starts, crackle pops. I do appreciate that being available on a stock exhaust. So overall, I think this car drives and handles great. Even though I'm being, practicing some self-control. The suspension is very tight. I would go over speed bumps, and you go over the front wheels, and it's a fairly stiff bump, and then you go over the rear wheels, and it's very stiff. So I'm actually, for the normal setting, this car is pretty tight, which I personally love. I love sort of being jostled around a bit in a proper sports car. I think the steering is still on point for normal mode. I'm looking forward to seeing what that's like in sport mode. Power delivery, once again, is nice. It's linear. It sort of has that deceptive speed where it'll go. Obviously, I haven't done any wide open throttle pulls yet. And overall, the balance of sort of that sports car, sort of race car-ish, compared to that luxury feeling, for me, it balances it right. It has a hard enough edge, even with its luxury aspects. So far, I do think it is a worthy successor to the STI, even though they are two different beasts. This car is still a blast to drive, even driving it while braking it. And this has been my GR Supra, according to David.